Hi! Welcome to Leia's Library. Find yourself a cozy corner, grab yourself a nice hot drink, and let's get started. This video will be covering all of the books that I read in January of this year. Yes, it is 4 months late. It be like that sometimes. Anyway, let's get started. So the first book that I read this year was Alone by Megan E. Freeman. It is a children's adventure / poetry book, I think is what it would qualify as. Anyway, this story follows Maddie, who is a 12-year-old girl who hatches a scheme to have a sleepover with some of her friends at one of her parents' not abandoned, it's not abandoned, they're just not in it, one of her parents' cottages, only to wake up the next morning to find herself completely alone in a town that has been mysteriously abandoned. We follow her and her companion, who is a Rottweiler and very good boy named George. And we follow them as they learn to survive and fend for themselves while they wait for rescue to come. Have you ever finished a book and thought, so glad I read that? Because that was me with this book. I finished it and just heaved a sigh because it was so beautiful. Like, not just that it was beautifully written, which it was, but it was also just such a beautiful story. And I guess maybe it was just like the story that I needed to start the year off with, especially after the past few years we've been having. And just watching Maddie's journey and her growth was so satisfying because you're just like cheering her on right from the very beginning. And my favorite thing is that her growth isn't linear. So it's not that she is struggling in the beginning and then has come to Jesus moment and then it's smooth sailing from there. It's no, she falls apart and then she pulls herself back together and keeps going until she falls apart again, and the cycle just repeats. And I have been there. Maybe I haven't been abandoned in a town, but you know what I have been? Very depressed. And it's a very similar thing where you just fall down a hole and claw your way back out and just keep going until you fall down another hole and crawl back out. And then your brain tells you, hey, maybe things aren't so bad. And then it's like, psych. So yeah, all that to say, I really enjoyed this book. I would highly recommend it. Yeah, I rated it what did I rate it? 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I only nicked off half a star because I thought the ending was kind of abrupt, and I've been thinking about it, and I don't know how I would have ended it, or I don't know what a better ending would have been. It just was very fast. But still, excellent read. Would recommend. Next up, we have She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan, which is a fantasy historical fiction retelling. Yeah. This is about a girl who grows up in a very, very poor family in a very, very poor village in Mongol-ruled China. She lives with her brother Zhu Chongba and her father. But because she's a girl, she's not really respected by either her brother or her father. They don't treat her very well, and they kind of leave all of the menial tasks to her. So it's no surprise when her father takes her and Zhu Chongba to a fortune teller. The fortune teller tells the girl that she has a fortune of nothingness. Meanwhile, Zhu Chongba is given a fortune of greatness. But a bandit attack on their village leaves them orphaned, and when Zhu Chongba dies of despair, the girl takes her chance, claims his name as her own, as well as his destiny, and enters a monastery. I don't have a whole lot to say about this book. I enjoyed it. It didn't strike me in any particular way, but I had a pretty good time reading it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I think it was an enjoyable story. The writing wasn't anything spectacular. I think this is this author's first novel. So, and the story itself was good. So I think there's room for the writing to grow. But like I said, the story itself is interesting. The characters are all very interesting. I do think there are too many POV characters, personally. But all the characters themselves are really interesting. They're all really morally gray and kind of will do basically anything to get what's important to them, which is always fun. And there's a lot of LGBTQ plus rap. We love to see that. Yeah, okay, no, I gotta say it, because nobody warned me about it, so I need to warn you. There is a intimate scene towards the end of this book that comes out of nowhere, and it's a lot. It was a lot, and listen, if you're into that, that's great. Have it. It's there. Please enjoy. I'm just very asexual and not into that. So for it to come out of nowhere kind of made me go, oh. So yeah, now you've been warned, as I was not. Moving on. Oh yeah, all that to say. Didn't love it, still enjoyed it. We'll be reading the sequel. 4 out of 5 stars. Next is The Invisible Life of Addie Larue by V.E. Schwab. This is a fantasy fiction about a woman named Adeline? Addie, who in 1714, France makes a Faustian deal with a being. The deal is that she will live forever. However, no one that she meets will be able to remember her. And when she is tired of her long life, she must give her soul to the being that she made the deal with, whose name is Luc, by the way. She lives a very lonely life until 300 years later, when she meets a young man working at a bookstore who can remember her. Oh. This book was very hyped, which always makes me a little nervous. I wasn't even planning on reading it, but then it was recommended to me by a friend. And so I decided to read it, and I really liked it. I really liked it. First of all, the writing is stunning. It's beautiful. This author is really good at painting imagery with words. Does that make sense? I'm gonna say it makes sense. I hope somebody understands what I mean. But yeah, anyway, I really liked Addie too. She was resourceful, she was resilient, she was basically living out of pure spite. We love to see it. But the most interesting part for me was watching her relationship with Luc, who was the being that she made a deal with, and how that evolved over time. I don't want to give away any spoilers, so I won't. I'll just say that I really watched how their dynamic evolved. It was very interesting. Henry, who is one of the other main characters, I also really liked him. He's the one who can remember her. He was a character I really liked, and I appreciated that we got to know him outside of his relationship with Addie. That was nice. I do wish that this had been more of a character study with Addie. where we just like follow her really long life. And basically, I wanted this book to be Circe by Madeline Miller. Oh, hot take. Henry is a sexy lamp. Discuss. So after I finished reading this book, I kept mulling it over, and I kept coming back to the question of, does this story really need Henry? And the answer I came to was no. See, Henry could have been anything, because his only real purpose in the story is to drive Addie to find a way to break her curse, right? So he could have been anything, but maybe that's just me. I don't know. What do you think? Overall, I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars, because I did really, really enjoy it. Sexy lamp and all. Next was Under the Whispering Door by T.J. Klune. This is a contemporary fantasy following a rather unkind and unpleasant man named Wallace who suddenly dies, and he is taken by a reaper to this quaint, quirky little house run by a man named Hugo, who's not just a man, he is a ferryman. He's a ferryman. It's not that funny. Why am I laughing? Ferryman. Oh my gosh, I choked on my own stupid sense of humor. Anyway, he meets Hugo. We then follow Wallace's journey as he learns to truly live in his afterlife before he has to cross over. So, this is a very heartwarming story. I think it would make a great comfort read. If you've read The House in the Cerulean Sea, which is another book by T.J. Klune, that's very well known. I hear it talked about everywhere. I shouldn't make that face. I really like The House in the Cerulean Sea. Anyway, Under the Whispering Door is very similar in both story and tone to House in the Cerulean Sea. The worlds feel very similar, the characters feel very similar, the bare bones of the plot are basically the same. Both stories can be summed up with man living an unfulfilling life is forced to go to a strange house run by a caring and enigmatic man and his found family, falls in love and has his view on life completely turned upside down and becomes a better person because of it. So I can see how this would bother some people. Personally, I'm okay with it. I find that there are so many different ways to tell the same story, and it's in the ways that we find different ways of telling that story that make it interesting. It's why I like fairy tale retellings a lot. It's why I will watch or read or in any other way consume any Alice in Wonderland retelling. I'll do it. Give me something that's vaguely Alice in Wonderland related, I'll read it. No, I don't have a problem. Why do you ask? No, this isn't an Alice in Wonderland shrine. What makes you say that? Anyway, getting back to Under the Whispering Door / The House in the Cerulean Sea. These are long names. Maybe this is a story thread that this author is really interested in exploring, and I'm good with that. But that does mean that if you didn't like The House in the Cerulean Sea, you probably won't like Under the Whispering Door. They are pretty... They do have their differences. Under the Whispering Door has more of a focus on death and accepting death and grieving and what grief and that acceptance of death can look like in different people and what happens when you don't accept that. So even if you didn't like House in the Cerulean Sea, if that concept sounds interesting to you, then I'd still recommend Under the Whispering Door. Also, there's a ghost dog. You made me cry. Well, okay, to be fair, I don't actually know if it was the book that made me cry, or if it was the fact that I also recently lost my childhood dog, and yeah, now I've made myself sad. Moving on. Anyway, 4 out of 5. On to the next one. The next one is Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is a mythology retelling about the Greek demigod Achilles and his childhood friend / lover, Patroclus. Suck on that, historians. Before I start, I just gotta say, I am so happy to finally read an Achilles story that not only strongly features Patroclus, but also strongly features Patroclus as Achilles' lover. I am so tired of seeing Patroclus be pushed to the side or relegated to just a friend or a cousin. Looking at you, Troy 2004. It was so delightful to finally see 2 gay men who loved each other just love each other. Moving on to the actual book. These boys made me so sad. Because, see, I've been a big fan of Greek mythology since I was very small. So I was already very familiar with this story. So I knew how it ended. Which honestly just kind of made it play out like a Greek tragedy all the more, so it was very fitting. I think those who don't know the story going in will have more of a more shocking experience, and they might have a bit more of an emotional payoff at the end, but knowing how it ended in no way impacted that for me. So speaking of the boys, how refreshing was it to see an actually pretty healthy relationship throughout the whole book? Like, don't get me wrong, they both have their flaws as individuals, as everybody does, but they talked to each other. They communicated their feelings. They didn't hide anything from each other. It's like the bare minimum, and yet it's so hard to find in any media. And their dynamic was so good, because Achilles is by far the more powerful of the two, yet he always goes out of his way to make Patroclus feel included and valued, and he just respects him so much. And Patroclus is just a guy. Like, he's just a dude. He's not qualified for any of this. The literal only special thing about him is his personality, which makes him a really good foil to literal demigod Achilles. 5 out of 5. Loved it. We made it. We're on the last book. So this last book that I read for January was For the Wolf by Hannah Whitten, which is a Red Riding Hood retelling. This version has the Red Riding Hood character as a girl named Red, because of course she is. Although it's short for Redaris, I still think you could have done better. But anyway, she's what's known as a second daughter, and in her culture, the royal family's first daughter is for the throne, and the second daughter is for the wolf, meaning she's to be sacrificed to the wolf that lives in this creepy, spooky forest. And they do this in hopes that by sacrificing this person, the wolf will return their gods to them, because their gods have been imprisoned, if I'm remembering correctly. This second daughter, Red, is actually almost relieved to go because she has a secret magical power that makes her a danger to her loved ones. But she soon finds out that the myths of her people are not entirely accurate, and the wolf is in fact a man. I got almost 200 pages into this book, and I I just couldn't do it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if this is your favorite book. I respect that. I just couldn't do it. Which is saying something, because I have only ever not finished a book maybe 3 times in my life, and this was one of them. So, and normally I will force myself to finish a book that I don't like, but this one broke me. And also I had a bunch of other library books waiting, and time was a ticking, so I just couldn't do it. The thing that did it for me was that the characters in this book didn't talk like real people, which is a big pet peeve of mine. And not in that they talked poetically or anything, because I'm okay with that. That's fine. I mean, they didn't talk logically. They talked as if they were being written for a plot. You know, like the plot relied on them not speaking like real, sane, intelligent people. And that, for example, this isn't a spoiler because it's on the dust jacket, or the description. But Red finds out that the wolf isn't a monster. She goes into the forest and she finds where the wolf lives, and he's just a guy. And she has no questions. She says she's too tired to question it right now. Girl, you are so hyped on adrenaline. You just ran through a spooky forest only to find out that the entire myths of your people that you grew up with were wrong, and you're not gonna ask questions because you're sleepy? And then the wolf man tells her, oh, you can actually go home. And Red, part of the reason why she's here is because she has this magical ability that puts her loved ones in danger, so she can't be around them, is her thinking. But she doesn't convey any of this. The wolf just says, you can go home if you want to, and she cuts him off and just shouts, no! And the wolf is just like, okay, I guess you can stay. Like, my dude, that was a pretty vehement reaction to a very justified thing that you just said. You're not gonna ask why she doesn't want to go home? No? Not even a little? So, yeah, maybe it gets better towards the end. I don't intend to revisit it anytime soon. But you can let me know down in the comments if it actually gets better. Maybe you can convince me to go back to it, but for now, it's a no from me. And that is it. Those were all the books that I read in January of this year. Let me know what you thought about those books down in the comments. Did you like them? Did you not like them? Is Henry a sexy lamp? Does For the Wolf get better? Let me know, and I'll see you next time. If you want to find me elsewhere, you can find me on Instagram at Leia like the princess for cosplay, acting, and cat content. And if you want to support my small business, you can find that on Instagram at Moonlit Cat Creations or moonlightcatcreations.com. Until next time, stay cozy. Toodles.